Mummy, Percy Jackson, Hercules, and Thor.
These characters are the stars of modern-day movies most of you have both watched and enjoyed, and all of them come from ancient mythology.
The mythologies of ancient cultures have similarities which unite human perception.
Today, we will first present concepts in the ancient Egyptian pantheon.
Second, we will talk about the Greek pantheon from Mount Olympus.
Third, we will discuss the pantheon with the largest and most successful empire, Rome.
Fourth, we will present the unique views of the Norse pantheon.
And lastly, we will talk about how these ancient mythologies are connected to both each other and the modern era.
To begin, we will first discuss the ancient Egyptian pantheon. With its mummies, hieroglyphs, and symbols such as the Eye of Ra, the Egyptian pantheon is one of the most interesting and well-known of the ancient world. According to Alan Isaacs, a graduate from Stanford University with a PhD in English, in his encyclopedia published in 2003, Ra, or Re, is the Egyptian god of the sun and creation. He is typically depicted with the head of a falcon and bearing solar discs. According to Geraldine Pinch, an author and Egyptologist in her book Egyptian Mythology, in 2002, he sails through the sky by day and through the underworld by night. His cult is based at Heliopolis, which means the city of the sun god. According to Benjamin Lee, an author and student at Byron High School, in his book titled The Book of the Dead for the Modern Dead Guy, published in May of 2018, the Eye of Ra, otherwise known as the Soul Eye, was used to find Ra's lost children. This soul eye then turned into Uraeus, a tiny snake on Ra's forehead.
According to some versions, this soul eye or Eye of Ra then became Sekhmet, the Egyptian goddess of war, the consort of the creator god Ptah, but most importantly, the destroyer of the enemies of Ra. According to Pinch, as cited before, Sekhmet is typically portrayed with the head of a lion and the body of a woman. After being created from the Eye of Ra, Sekhmet was sent down as death. Her goal was to punish humanity for rebelling against Ra, and she became known as she who dances on blood. After Sekhmet nearly slaughtered the entire human race, Ra finally tricked her into drinking beer, causing her to transform into the peaceful goddess Hathor. In hindsight, humans were said to be born from the tears of the Eye of Ra, so Sekhmet was, in theory, killing her own children.
Speaking of killing and death, Anubis is the Egyptian god of funerals and death, and is usually portrayed with the head of a jackal. But, according to Lynn Green, a member of the Society for the Study of Egyptian Antiques, in an article that was published in Gods, Goddesses, Mythology in 2012, Osiris is actually the god of the underworld, and Anubis is more responsible for the mummification process and the opening of the mouth ceremony. And according to Ben Lee, as previously cited, the opening of the mouth ceremony is where Anubis uses an anocher to cut open the mouth of someone in their afterlife. And Osiris is ruler of the afterlife, also known as the Duwat in Egyptian mythology. Osiris once even ruled Egypt until his brother Seth got so jealous that he drowned and then dismembered him. Osiris was partially brought back to life, only to be banished to the Duwat to become king of the dead.
Now that we have discussed Egyptian mythology, let's discuss Greek mythology. Greek mythology contains some of the most famous gods and myths. One of these gods is Apollo, the Greek god of the sun. In addition to being the Greek god of the sun, he is the god of art and music, which is very important to the Greeks. According to Ellen Switzer and Kostas, renowned journalists and experts in Greek mythology, they wrote in their book, Gods, Heroes, and Monsters, published in 1988, that Apollo was one of the most admired and respected gods in the entire pantheon because he was son of the sky god Zeus. Apollo's story began when Python, a great serpent, tortured his pregnant mother Leto. After finally finding asylum on a floating island, Leto gave birth to Apollo, who later sought revenge on the Python with his newfound skills in archery. According to Bernard Evslin, an author from Rutgers University with a focus on Greek mythology, he wrote in his Google book, Gods, Demigods, and Demons, published in 2012, that Apollo preached moderation in all of its forms, and he was a charismatic young man. Apollo drives a fiery 4-horse chariot, or the sun, through the sky every day. When he reaches the horizon, he bridles his horses, thus creating night.
Ares is the Greek god of war, and more specifically, the brutality of war. According to Switzer and Kostas, as mentioned before, Ares has dominion over the blood frenzies and crazy rage that is found in battles. They go on to say that because of his violent role in the pantheon, Ares is one of the most disliked and hated gods, both by other Greek gods and by the citizens. In almost every myth that he is a part of, Ares is considered the villain, and in one he even has an affair with his brother's wife, the goddess of love, Aphrodite. According to Evslin, as mentioned before, deaths in battle were symbolic fuel for his sadistic desires of conflict and bloodshed. All his love for violence eventually brought Ares into favor with Hades.
With war comes death, which Hades rules as the Greek god of the underworld. According to Switzer and Kostas, as mentioned previously, although Hades arguably had the largest kingdom and the most power, he was often jealous of the other gods. Like Ares, Hades was often seen as a villain by both the citizens and other gods in the Greek pantheon. This is partially because in one legend he was said to have kidnapped Zeus's daughter Persephone, which creates winter every year. Citizens called Hades by false names in order to avoid calling on him directly. Hades cherished death and hated life, which sets him apart from other gods in the Greek pantheon.
Now that we have gone over the Greek pantheon, we will now discuss the Roman pantheon. According to Kathleen Daly, an editor and renowned author at Golden Books, in her book, Greek and Roman Mythology A to Z, published in 1992, the Greeks were eventually conquered by the Romans, and the gods of the Greek pantheon had to adapt to the views of this growing empire. Even today, Rome is seen as one of history's largest and most successful empires.
According to Malcolm Day, a writer, editor, theologian, in his book, 100 Characters from Classical Mythology, that was published in 2007, Apollo is one of the greatest Olympian gods and the only Greek deity that his name was kept when absorbed into the Roman pantheon. He was born to the sky god Zeus on the floating islands of Ortygia and Delos. Fed on ambrosia and nectar, he quickly matured to a god of not only art, but also archery, prophecy, healing, and the sun. Although he was absorbed into the Roman pantheon, the Roman pantheon was more focused on politics and fighting rather than art and music. So they had different ideas on his importance in daily life. Because of this, they demoted him to a god of mere entertainment. They even made statues of him less masculine. Despite all of this, Apollo is still a very important deity, and he will be remembered for his slaying of the sinister Python and his niche as the god of light.
While Apollo kept his name and character, Ares was reconstructed into Mars, a more disciplined and mature version of the originally immature and whiny god of war. According to Switzers and Kostas, as previously mentioned, war is a very important part of Roman culture, thus making Mars very popular with the mortal world. Although the rest of the gods were very wary of Mars's love for bloodshed, Mars became the god that soldiers and fighters would worship before going into battle. Despite this newfound popularity, the Romans built few, if any, temples to Mars. However, the Romans did change Ares' signature vulture into the dog, a sign for Mars's newfound discipline.
With an increased rate of war comes an increased rate of death and the belief in the afterlife. The Romans This afterlife was the underworld, and Pluto was its king. According to Lynn and Don Don, a married couple with degrees in history, geography, language arts, and education, on their website from 2010, they state that while Pluto is not necessarily the god of the dead, he is the god of the underworld and all of the dead and damned souls that are a part of it. They go on to say that unlike Mars, who received a major popularity boost from being absorbed into the Roman pantheon, Pluto did not. However, to the Romans he was seen as a generally fair god and hospitable to the souls of those who would not upset the gods during their lifetime.
Now that we have presented the Roman pantheon, we will discuss the Norse pantheon. With its famous view of the end of the world, the Norse pantheon offers a fresh perspective on the concepts of the sun, war, and death. According to Claude Lequeteau, a French historian studying the European Middle Ages, including magic, mythology, and folktales, in his book in 2016, Sol was the Norse goddess of the sun. One of her defining stories is that she is destined to be devoured by the wolf's skull during Ragnarok. Sol was one of two children, Mani or moon, and Sol or sun. Sol was married off to a man named Glenir. This angered the gods, and so they sent Mani and Sol to live in the sky, and they charged Sol with driving the horses that bring the sun across the horizon.
Meanwhile, Tyr is the Norse god of war, justice, and order. He is known as the one-handed god for reasons discussed later. According to Marco Sampaolo, an information architect and editor at the Encyclopedia Britannica, in an article on their website published on March 21st, 2017, Tyr is one of the oldest Germanic gods and deals with war, justice, treaties, and oaths. According to Claude Lequeteau, as cited before, Tyr lost his hand when the gods decided to imprison the increasingly dangerous wolf Fenrir. The gods tried to trick Fenrir into donning chains, but Fenrir was suspicious and demanded that one of the gods place their hand inside his jaws as a sign of their good intentions. Tyr accepted this and sacrificed his hand to ensure that the gods could successfully imprison Fenrir.
While Tyr's sacrifice was a hand, others were sacrificing their lives. Hela is the daughter of Loki and the Norse goddess of the underworld. And according to Claude Lequeteau, as previously cited, she is also the sister of Fenrir. She is often depicted with a face that is half white and half blue, or half alive and half dead. Her plate was hunger, her weapon was famine. Her bed was illness, and her bed curtains were pale misfortune. And those who broke moral oaths and laws were sent to the southern region of Hell, which was considered the worst region. There they were fed to the great dragon Nidhogger, where he gnawed on their corpses.
Now that we have discussed the pantheons and their gods, we will review the universal commonalities that unite these beliefs. The gods and their stories of these four pantheons have much in common. All of these cultures view objects and ideas in the same light, thus showing us how humans would view these universal concepts. First, according to Lequeteau, as previously cited, the destruction of the sun, such as the death of Sol during Ragnarok, is universally interpreted as a major catastrophe, marking the end of life as we know it. Second, according to Switzers and Costas, as previously cited, all of these cultures are familiar with war, whether that be the unbridled rage of Ares and Sekhmet, the discipline of Mars, or the scars, loyalty, and sacrifices of Tyr. Third, according to Don, the underworld is a place where the injustices of the living can be avenged. One example of this justice is when they would feed the corpses of oath breakers to Hell's dragon Nidhogger. Due to the negative connotations of death, Hades was often disliked, while Pluto was given the idea of redemption.
The beliefs of ancient mythologies still influence cultures today. In fact, the next time that you celebrate Christmas on December 25th, know that there's no actual reason that that Jesus was born on that day. No evidence for it. In fact, according to Encyclopedia Britannica, an organization of fact-checked online researchers, in an article on their website, last updated in 2019, they state that one of the reasons that day was actually chosen was because it celebrated Sol Invictus, the Roman god of the sun who had replaced Apollo at the time. In fact, mythology was used as entertainment in the past, but in the present it is by no means extinct. Large corporations such as Marvel Industries continually use mythology as reservoirs for new superheroes and new stories, such as Thor and Loki and Thor Ragnarok. Even seemingly original comic book characters, such as Shazam, often have ties to mythology. According to Charles Beck and Bill Parker, the artists and writers behind Whiz Comics issue number 2, the original appearance of Shazam, published in February 1940, say that Shazam is actually an acronym for 6 mythological characters: Solomon, Hercules, Atlas, Zeus, Achilles, and Mercury.
Today, we have first presented concepts in the ancient Egyptian pantheon.
Second, we presented the Greek gods from Mount Olympus.
Third, we presented the pantheon with the largest and most successful empire, Rome.
Fourth, we presented the unique views of the Norse pantheon.
And lastly, we talked about how these mythologies are connected to both each other and the modern era.
The mythologies of ancient cultures have similarities which unite human perception.
So, when you go see Thor battling Thanos in Avengers Endgame, be sure to remember that you are witnessing mythology in the modern day.